Everything you endured in silence, every sacrifice made without witness, every battle fought without acknowledgement, every season survived without a single person fully understanding what it cost you to keep going, is about to receive a public confirmation so precise and so undeniable that the people who doubted your narrative, questioned your integrity, or minimized the weight of what you carried will be confronted with evidence they cannot reframe, dismiss, or offer an alternative explanation for. The validation coming toward you was not designed for your ego. It was engineered by divine justice for the restoration of a truth that was buried under misunderstanding for far longer than was ever fair or accurate. Throughout the entire recorded history of divine justice, the specific pattern of private suffering, followed by public vindication, where everything endured in silence is brought into open light with irrefutable clarity, is described in the oldest spiritual traditions as the signature movement of heaven when it determines that a truth has been suppressed beyond its appointed season of concealment. Most injustices are corrected quietly, partially, and in ways that leave room for continued misinterpretation. What is being prepared for you is categorically different. A vindication so structurally complete and so publicly positioned that it closes every avenue of reinterpretation that doubt and misunderstanding previously kept open. Heaven has determined that your silence has lasted precisely long enough, and what replaces it will be permanent. Think carefully about the private decision you made, perhaps recently, perhaps across an extended season, to carry the weight of your truth without forcing its recognition, to allow yourself to be misunderstood rather than defend yourself through methods that would have compromised the integrity of what you were protecting. There was a specific moment where the injustice of your situation was at its most acute, where proving your truth was most tempting and most accessible, and where doing so through the available means would have cost you something essential about the quality of the vindication now being prepared. You chose to wait, to trust, and to let the truth remain temporarily buried rather than excavated in a way that would have diminished what its full emergence was always meant to produce. From the moment you made the choice to carry your truth in silence rather than force its premature recognition, forces on both sides of the spiritual spectrum turned their full attention toward the quality of what you were protecting and the integrity with which you were protecting it. Darkness understood that a truth being held with this level of patience and this quality of character, if fully vindicated, would produce a restoration so complete that it would permanently dismantle every narrative constructed around your silence, and it worked methodically to make the weight unbearable, to introduce circumstances designed to make premature self-defense feel not just justified but spiritually necessary. Divine intelligence was simultaneously documenting the full evidence of your restraint, building the case for a vindication whose authority would be proportionate to the patience required to receive it. The integrity of your silence was tested across multiple seasons with the specific cruelty of injustice that understands where a person is most vulnerable and applies pressure there with deliberate precision. The moment arrived where someone who had contributed to your misunderstood season was publicly elevated while your truth remained buried, and the temptation to force the narrative correction through whatever means were available was acute and entirely understandable. You absorbed the injustice and maintained your position anyway. The opportunity came to partially vindicate yourself through a version of your truth that would have been believed but would have required compromising the completeness of what the full vindication was being built to reveal. And you recognized the partial offer for what it was and declined it in favor of the whole. When higher intelligence compiled the complete record of your silence, the consistency of your integrity under the sustained pressure of being misunderstood, the quality of your restraint under circumstances that provided overwhelming justification for self-defense, the depth of your trust in a vindication you could not see but continued to protect space for, the classification issued carried the full weight of heaven's recognition of extraordinary human faithfulness. You were identified as a soul whose truth had been protected with a quality of patient integrity so rare that the vindication being prepared in Response to it could not be a partial correction or a quiet clarification. It had to be a complete public undeniable restoration proportionate to the extraordinary cost of the silence that preceded it. At the precise moment your silence reached its divinely appointed completion, when the full evidence of your integrity had been assembled and the architecture of your vindication was structurally ready for release, something shifted in the divine realm with the gravity of a judgment long prepared, finally being delivered. The archangels assigned to the stewardship of divine justice stood as witnesses to the complete record of what your silence had cost and what it had protected. Every private battle, every misunderstood season, every moment of carrying alone what should have been shared and acknowledged. God observed the totality of the evidence and issued a determination that the truth you had protected with such extraordinary patience was now appointed for full, public, permanent release. Following that divine determination, a decree of vindication was released into your timeline with the irreversible authority of heaven as justice finding its appointed moment of expression. The narratives constructed around your silence are being officially dismantled. The misunderstandings that were allowed their season of circulation are being replaced by a clarity so complete and so publicly positioned that every space where the false narrative took root will receive the correction with equal visibility. The people, circumstances, and opportunities that were influenced by the misrepresentation of your truth are being reconfigured around the reality of it, and the reconfiguration will carry the momentum of everything that was compressed inside your silence, patient, thorough, and impossible to argue with. The identity assigned to you by the season of being misunderstood, someone whose truth was questionable, whose integrity was uncertain, whose silence was interpreted as confirmation of the narratives built around it, was never an accurate description of what you are or what you carried through that season. What you actually are is a truth keeper, an ancient soul who entered this lifetime carrying a specific assignment to protect certain realities through seasons of misunderstanding so complete and so costly that only a soul with extraordinary spiritual depth could have sustained the protection without breaking. The vindication now arriving is not a correction of a mistake. It is the appointed revelation of a truth that was always real, always intact, and always waiting for the moment heaven determined it had been sufficiently protected to be fully released. With the decree of your vindication now fully active and your true identity completely released, the mission carried within your public restoration becomes unmistakably clear. You are not receiving this vindication simply for personal relief or individual restoration. You are receiving it as a demonstration of a principle that every soul who has ever carried truth through a season of misunderstanding needs to witness in someone else's life before they can fully trust it in their own. Your mission is to carry into every space your restoration now opens the living evidence that divine justice is real, that truth protected with integrity is never permanently buried, and a complete vindication, however costly, always produces a restoration more thorough than anything forced recognition could have generated. As the decree of your vindication activates across the material dimensions of your life, the restoration will arrive not merely in the form of corrected perceptions, but in the tangible realignment of every circumstance that was organized around the misrepresentation of your truth. Relationships that distance themselves based on the false narrative will begin returning with the full weight of recognition for what they failed to see. Opportunities that were redirected away from you during the misunderstood season will begin surfacing through channels that reflect the corrected record of your integrity. Financial, professional, and creative alignments that were disrupted by the season of misunderstanding will begin reconfiguring around the reality of who you are, and the speed of the reconfiguration will reflect the completeness of the vindication being released. As your vindication becomes publicly visible and the restoration of your truth begins producing undeniable evidence in your external circumstances, something will begin happening in the people around you who are themselves carrying truths through their own seasons of misunderstanding. Your restoration will not simply encourage them, it will fundamentally alter their capacity to endure their own silence by providing them with concrete, proximate, impossible to dismiss evidence that the patience being required of them is not spiritual abandonment, but divine architecture. They will watch your vindication arrive and feel something shift in their own interior. A deepening of trust, a renewed capacity for the silence their own vindication requires, and a recognition that what heaven restores, it restores completely and publicly and without apology for how long the restoration took. The vindication being released into your life is not an isolated act of divine justice in the spiritual landscape of this moment. It is one restoration within a vast and coordinated global movement of truth being brought into public light after extended seasons of misunderstanding, suppression, and silence. Across the world right now, thousands of souls who carried truth with integrity through seasons that cost them enormously are crossing the threshold into their own public vindications simultaneously. You are part of a generation of truth keepers whose collective restoration will produce a permanent shift in what the world understands about the relationship between silence, patience, and the completeness of the justice that follows both. When you encounter these souls, the recognition between you will be immediate, and the combined weight of your restorations will be impossible for the world to process as anything other than divine. If this message reached you today, it was not a random encounter with content. It was a delivery timed with the precision of something that was sent to meet you at the exact moment your soul required confirmation that the vindication you have been waiting for, protecting space for, and sometimes privately doubting the arrival of, is not only real, but already structurally in motion and irrevocably appointed for public release. Your silence needed to be named for what it actually was. Not weakness, not defeat, not confirmation of the narratives built around it, but the most extraordinary and most costly form of integrity available, the protection of a truth through a season designed to make that protection feel impossible. If these words have given language to something you have been carrying without adequate expression, leave 777 in the comments and let the universe register your conscious recognition that your vindication is coming. Share this immediately with someone still in the middle of their misunderstood season who is dangerously close to abandoning the silence that their own complete restoration requires. Subscribe so that every message calibrated to the frequency of your restoration finds you at precisely the moment it was designed to arrive and stay. Because what is about to be publicly confirmed about who you are and what you survived will exceed everything your silence allowed you to imagine was still possible.